At the heart of it all, she saw great value in allowing art to be a medium through which healing has occurred.
Sisters, hey, little girl, are you looking for hope in the world that has lied to you about who you really are? Wrong woman, holding in story she needs to tell.
Welcome back to Staci Speaks Hope. We are honored today to have another guest to share her journey. Sheryl Davis is a former kindergarten teacher and a recovering bureaucrat who refused to normalize and accept systems of rigidity and advance oppressive policies and practices from the classroom to the community and city hall. Experience has been in education, nonprofit administration, being a systems leader, a project manager. She's created dozens of programs, really looking at youth development. The beauty of what this beautiful sister has done, it's about healing her little girl because of things that have gone on in her life. She's packs powerful corporate skills, educational skills, but at the heart of it all, she saw great value in allowing art to be a medium through which healing has occurred. That's dear to my heart because I was at an art school for 13 years as the administrator and a teacher, not an artist, although in my heart, I found out I was. So happy to have you join us today, Sheryl, and welcome.
Yeah, oh, thank you so much for having me, Stacy. And I love that. I didn't know that you worked at an art school. And what did you teach?
I taught math,
Oh, yeah.
and then I was a principal
Oh,
and
wow.
ended up being the interim executive director. And
That-
then it was time to go and do some other things. So you always
oh,
know when it's that you get that nudge, it's time.
yeah, yeah. That's awesome.
So as you're here today, I invite you to share with us your journey and what you remember about your little girl, what you found as you were processing life and knew that it was necessary to go back to your little girl in that healing.
Yeah, I mean, again, thank you so much for having me. I'm really grateful to be able to be here and to talk with you. It's interesting because I resigned, from a job I had been in for years last year, and really felt like I had lost my purpose, right? Like I just was just devastated and spent a lot of time in deep thought, but also in deep pain. And part of that healing process for me, I was just thinking about that this morning, was like, drawing hearts like a little girl, and it brought me like joy in that way. And then I started to find myself drawing these pictures, and a friend of mine said, "Why do you keep drawing this? Seems like you keep drawing the same little girl over and over again." And I felt like the little girl was giving me some semblance of hope, right? And so between the hearts and the little girl, I was getting this hope and joy going. And it just reminded me, first and foremost, having taught kindergarten for years, it just reminded me when I used to say to children, like, "What did you draw?" They never would be offended, like, "You don't know what it is? You can't tell. It's not pretty. It's not right." Like they would just be, you say to them, "What is it?" Because all you saw was a squiggly line on a paper, and they'd have some elaborate story. They were never offended that you didn't know what it was. They weren't offended that you didn't say it was pretty, right? And I was like, how do we get back to that confidence, that trust, that hope, where we're just like, "I don't care what you think about my drawing, but I'm going to show it to you. I'm going to talk about it, and I'm going to enjoy it." And so I started to say, like, use art as that, right? As that way to like express yourself, to share, and you can share the picture or not share the picture, but like it's not in being validated by somebody else, right? And so I started to just remember and reflect on those childhood moments of just going outside and being happy with the simple things like spinning around in a circle, or playing in the water or playing in the mud. I think that's the
Yeah.
essence of like, how do I get back to, you fall off the bike, somebody gives you a band-aid and a kiss, and you get back up and you do it all over again.
They kiss my boo-boo and I'll be fine.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Even though my leg is broken, I don't know the difference because you kissed my boo-boo and you told me it was fine and I believed you.
Yeah.
I love that. And we could have hung out together because that's the kind of stuff I did as a little girl, mud and throwing rocks and playing. And I love that. And I love that your little girl revival is what you offer to women. The
Yeah.
name practice that you and activities that you offer because we're reviving something that could have died or might have died.
Hmm.
We've lost parts of her along our way. So what was
Yes.
that like for you when you started, especially if you want to talk more about the pain and really how you transitioned out of that pain and how this helped you?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I was writing a lot. And in the earlier days, I was really, really sad. And I remember getting ready to, I had a friend that I would always be like, let me read you what I wrote. And I remember I was getting ready to read it, and they were like, I can't take another sad poem. Please, not another sad poem. And it made me laugh. It brought me so much joy. But it also was because I had done this other process, because I had written so much. And it's funny you say that about dying, because I have a poem that I wrote called I've Died Before, right? And it talks about like that cycle of, hurt or harm, and where we lose pieces of ourself along the way to protect ourselves, or that we that fall away because somebody else didn't value it. And so that revival is really that. It's like, how do we get back to picking up the pieces that we left before and trying to put ourselves back together?
I'm trying to contain myself because whoo, that is so true. Because it wasn't valued by somebody else, we threw it away
Yes.
and forgot to honor. No, this is me.
Right.
This is what
Right.
makes me whole. And if I throw that away because you don't like it and you're not part of me, then now I'm not whole either.
Right.
And enough of those that happen. And we look up one day and who are we? Where are we? Where did we go? We don't even know where we dropped the pieces to go back and get them.
Exactly. Exactly. Because we've lost so many pieces. Like there are some big chunks that some traumatic moment or thing will happen, and we know exactly at that point in time, like that we lost a piece of us. But this the slow erosion. I was in a Bible study a couple of weeks ago, and the pastor, she was talking about it's the slow erosion, right? It's the pieces that fall off that we may not even feel at the bottom. But that slow erosion is slowly, decaying and making you fall inward and losing something.
That is so true. And it happens through so many different ways,
Hmm.
simultaneously even. Our work life, our careers, our personal life, our things in our childhood with childhood relationships or parent relationships. Of all the women I talk to, there's so many different facets to the stories of how we just slowly, you think of the rocks. I used to teach science, and the rocks that are smooth
Right.
because water has just
Exactly.
worn them out bit by bit, layer by layer over time.
It's funny because this last semester I was talking, and sociology folks are ready to talk about stratification, but I was doing I was working with this group of students, a cohort of Black students in an African American studies class, and they were doing community engaged in learning. And I was like, so let's talk about stratification. And they were like, why would we talk about that? And what is it? And like the science of it all, and like talking about strata and having them understand like these layers, and that we decide who's worthy of something about based on which layer they're in, right? How we've kind of stratified. And so when you were just talking about that, like I feel like personally, science and math, all of these things are so entwined with culture and art, right? Like when we think about shapes, when we think about like the mixing and blending and how all those things happen, and that we don't see like the metaphor of that in life even, right? The numbers and the time and the way that that goes, and how this mixing with this creates this whole other, in classrooms we talk a lot about like the lessons are never the same because year after year the dynamic of the classroom is different, and like that energy and who's in the room, and like as the teacher, you're trying to figure out how to pull out the best of everyone, but everybody has a different best.
Absolutely. And just thinking of that, thinking about, I used to teach something called music and math. Like math is the time signature, y'all. The music would sound all over the place if there wasn't some order to how the notes were played and how long they lasted.
Mhm.
And really in our minds, we separate. and isolate. And in our humanity, isolation is the slow road to death. The enemy uses isolation to get us to think it's just me. This never happened to anybody else before, and nobody will understand. So I just said cave into ourselves. I got a visual. I'm very visual, so I got a picture of that just
Yeah.
curling up inside. And if we do that, I was looking at the colors on your shirt. That is a blend. There's a
Mm.
specific blend that makes that pink.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. The more I've been doing, I've been like gradually, I was like I try to post things on social media and I'm like, the algorithm is like, what is she doing? Because every day it's a different, like, I started out with coloring and I realized, like you think, oh, they draw these faces and they just get a brown or they just get a pink or they get a, and like literally even just to get a shade of white complexion on a piece of paper, it is a blend of like 5 or 6 different colors when these artists do it, or
Yeah.
getting the brown and it's got like purples and reds and understanding like how these mixtures happen. And I think that is like that's the evolution of the little girl, but like the piece of it is that like taking the risk to color in the first place and not being cared when you're little, you don't care about being inside the lines, right? And you're not worried about like whether they're the actual color of the person. If you want a purple person or a blue person, like you do that. And if they're a mix of those things, but we get to a point where we're like, oh my gosh, I colored outside the line. I got to throw this paper away. Or that's not, people aren't that color, so we can't imagine this that way. And I think that is, when you talk about math and music, like I've always said to people, like when we talk about videotaping or when we talk about like recording, like it is all math. Like what number do you stop at? Where do you splice it? How do you put it back together? You only have 30 seconds, like all this blending. And there's a piece of this that we become so locked into it that we don't even enjoy the process. Like young people, kids know that they only have 30 minutes for recess, but they're going to make the most of that 30 minutes, you know what I mean? And so like we're locked into the numbers and not into the moment.
And we're punitive with ourselves about it.
Yeah.
I colored outside the line, so I'm bad. I'm
Hmm.
wrong. And not only what our external experience is with others harming us, they're bad and wrong. Sometimes they're just broken, but
Yeah.
we are. And so, as you share this, what message do you have to our listeners that are in that journey? I talk about journaling, but tell me more. If you were giving somebody a guide, I have people I talk about in my No More Lies healing workbook and journal. What do you do if your little girl is hiding?
Yeah.
How would
Yeah.
you help coax her out? What tips do you have?
Yeah, I mean, part of my journey was like also figuring out like what are these things, and I landed with these M's that I've been kind of working on and building out. One is meditate, and so it's vague enough for everybody to use it. But when I talk about meditation, I'm really talking about praying. It's about like this is my time to be quiet, to be silent, to read, to pray, and to just try and hear from God. So meditation is really important. Taking a moment to be quiet because that allows your brain to think, right? And that's also why I like coloring and other things where you're just doing that, where it's silent and you have an opportunity for, they talk about mindless activities, right?
Mm.
Like, so washing the dishes in the shower, all these things, like when you do those things, then things come to you, right? Like, and all of a sudden you're able to see things differently. So finding a way for meditation, for silence to kind of practice that. The other piece is music. Like I like turn on some music and dance, turn on some music and cry, turn on some music and just sit and listen. But like music is, it's an instrument, it's a tool, it's a way to kind of get, so, turn on whatever music that you enjoyed as a child and like reminisce and remember and see what that evokes for you. And for some folks, it may evoke traumatic experiences. So at that same time, like listen to the music, be in that moment, and maybe go back to meditate after that. But using that music and the meditation. My other one is movement. When when I was really struggling, I was like, okay, I'm going to take a walk. Like going outside, taking the walk, looking around outside. And again, it became another opportunity where things came to me, right? And sometimes do it without music, sometimes do it without being on the phone. But movement is important, yoga or dance or walking, but get up and move your body. And then another one is make something, right? Like, so I use that really as the creativity something. So you might want to make a, maybe you're great in the kitchen, or maybe you like to bake, or maybe you want to make a dress, or you want, but do something with your hands, get that movement that happening with your brain and your hands and all that. And then the last one, it's funny because I gave a talk one place that I was like, the last one I would say is move. And so I was like, well, I'm moving on up to the sky,
Mm,
to east, to the to an east side department in the sky, right? Like we're moving on up, like the Jeffersons, but
yeah.
that we have to, like, we really have to move on, right? Because we will stay in that moment. We will stay in that pain and that trauma. And we've got to figure out like how to move on, even if it's just for the moment and you come back to it, but you've got to move on.
Ooh, powerful. I love those, and the interconnection of you can easily connect how the music and dance go together. So you get
Yeah.
movement and music in one shot. So,
Yeah.
in those cases, the being in meditation, whatever that quiet place is, to still your heart,
Yeah.
feel what you feel. Sometimes journaling with meditation helps me. I love that, the mindless activities,
Yeah.
just to be still and quiet,
Yeah.
and to represence yourself, because so many times in our trauma, in our sadness, we're so fragmented and everything's got to go, got to run, got to do, and that's a way of not facing, not dealing with the emotions. The making something with your hands, kinesthetic learning. When I used to teach math, I used to say, what happened in math is they took away the manipulatives. In
Oh,
kindergarten, we
yeah.
learned how to write, and everybody said B with
Right.
your finger. And then all of a sudden, you move up to more difficult concepts, and now you can't use your hands anymore. And
Right.
worse now, with the computers, it's even more detached.
Yeah.
Turn the page, write on the paper, use your pen and pencil, and moving on is moving toward healing. That's how I heard that, because that's my
Yeah.
big thing, is like, we want to move toward healing. We're going to offer up, this is my trauma, Lord God, help me
Yeah.
move out of this broken place, because this is not what you had for me. I don't have to stay here, because
Right.
ultimately this is blocking me from becoming who you called me to be and to do. What is the calling on my life? These are so good. And I know you have an event coming up that has
Yeah.
people an opportunity to do that. Speak a little bit
Yeah.
about it. We're going to
Yeah.
a little
So
commercial moment we're going to give.
yeah, I started this series, Little Girl Revival, and I did the first one was Let's Talk, where we just got together a group of women and kind of talked about like, ended up spending a lot of time talking about the childhood experiences that people enjoyed, asked people afterwards to go out and do something they did as a child and to enjoy that. And I said I was going to jump rope, and I did jump rope. And although my spirit is younger, my body is not. And I definitely, my leg was bothering me the next day, but and so we did that one. Then we did another one. We have another one coming up, Little Girl Revival. Let's pray. And so we've got a group of women will come together and do some praying. But then we also have a guided journaling workshop. And so I've created a few pages and prompts and shared those with some of the folks who will join. And we'll just kind of go through together, writing and talking about things. A little bit of coloring in on the pages, a little bit of the prompts, and having a conversation about it. So I'm excited to dive into journaling and writing and artistic endeavors. And so we're going to have a later this summer. I'm going to do a writer's workshop, but then we're also going to do a creativity workshop where we do some collage and painting and coloring. So building this kind of series for helping people tap into that. So of course we'll have music. We'll ask people to get up and move around a little bit, but to tap into these ideas around how we heal.
That's fabulous. So, take going back to your little girl.
Yeah.
What did you discover in the moment of sadness as an adult? Was there a correlative event, feeling, situation where your little girl's way of responding showed up as your adult self?
Yeah, I mean, I think, to be honest, like some of it has been a process with my therapist slowly unpacking and uncovering, like things that happen in childhood that didn't get addressed. And that I took on this role of really protecting other people and letting go of childhood, right? And so I've probably been grown for way too long, right? When you were growing up, they were like, oh, she's like an old lady, or, they're just too grown. And so I wasn't grown fast, but I was grown like old. And that part of this is also about hiding, right? Like, so in a constant state of hide and seek, but not wanting to be found, right? And so that was the other piece, which is why I've been kind of trying to force myself to share more, to be present more, because my little girl was always like shrinking away and hiding and not wanting to be seen.
Ooh, that gave me chills. There's words that you say that are so much that resonate for me. And the important things that really stuck out is knowing that she was hiding, that she was
Mm-hmm.
hurting, that she didn't get to be a little girl
Yeah.
for whatever the reason, whatever and this is where I come in my communication is the lie that she believed. Something happened that told her, don't be a little girl. You have to take care of other people.
Right.
Secondary message in that is while you're taking care of other people, who are you not taking care of?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yourself.
Yeah.
That's why they have to tell people on the airplane to do what?
Take take care. Put yours on first.
Yes. All right.
Yeah.
So that's so ingrained in so many of us that you have to physically tell people if life and death is on the line, you got to protect yourself first so you can take care of the people that you are with that you want to protect.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting because there's this piece of hiding and protecting, and you kind of become aware of it. And part of it is maybe you think you're protecting yourself too, but you also are just really afraid of being seen,
Yeah.
right? Like, and what comes with that. And we talk about imposter syndrome, we talk about shrinking, we talk about being erased. And sometimes we erase ourselves, right? Like we don't even give people the opportunity to help us. And part of us, I think for me with the little girl, is that I was talking to some people last week and asked them, like, what qualities of a little girl do you think we all should have?
Mm.
And you know regardless of age or gender, and they said trust, and I was like, yes, because when we're little, before we lose that innocence, we trust that we're going to be taken care of, we trust that people are looking out for us, we trust that folks really are going to do what's in our best interest. Then somebody else said in touch with their feelings, and they were like, little boys are told, like, be mindful of how you move and how you show up, but that girls, especially younger girls, are encouraged to, like, if you're sad, it's okay, like you can feel how you feel, and owning those emotions and talking to them about it. And then somebody said unafraid, and I was like, you know what, that is so true. Like, they will walk up to strangers and say anything, or they will try anything. And it reminded me of when I was little and went to the YMCA or Boys and Girls Club or something in Texas, and went to the pool and went to the far end because I didn't know about depth, and jumped into the pool like no concern, no, and couldn't swim. And I jumped in, and because I just, was unafraid. We learn to be afraid of things. And unafraid is different than courageous, right? Where you know something could happen and you do it anyway. Different than brave, where you know that it could be bad, but you do it anyway. Unafraid is like you have no idea. Like, you're not worried. Like, to me, that's how I process unafraid, is that you are not worried about what could happen, right? Like, you just trust that it's going to be okay.
That's so amazing that you say that. I think of it as fearless without
Yeah.
fear, absence of fear, but how much that unencumbered existence has you move through life differently
Yeah.
because we're constantly looking, checking, and holding our breath. And should I this and second guess that? That is the ultimate destination of characteristics to possess. The things
Hmm.
that we would just do. Imagine
Yeah.
what we would do, and we've done great things, but what more would we do? And what would they have looked like? What would they have felt like doing them?
Right. I love that question when people are like, when they tell you, what would you do if you weren't afraid? Right? And
Yes,
asking you to do that, and then saying, do that thing, right? How would you move this business forward? How would you, like, approach someone? How would you engage if you weren't afraid? And I think that's something I need to do more of, but to really challenge myself to do the thing as if I wasn't afraid.
Have you identified what you're afraid of? You don't have to name it. I just that's just how you can take that
I mean,
however.
I think, the little girl piece in terms of like hiding and doing the other stuff is about like worthiness to some degree. And
Mhm.
so I'm really afraid of failure because I'm worried that somebody's going to be like, well, why did you even do that? You know, you're not smart enough, or you don't deserve it, or you don't, like all of these things. And I had a call with somebody earlier today, and I was just saying, it's really hard because people tend to like, you're only as good as your last great act.
Yeah.
And people tend to forget all the other things you've done. And if you're not careful, you'll forget too. And so when I was struggling at my worst point about like, after I resigned from my job and like trying to figure out like where I belonged or if I belonged anywhere. And I remember talking to this woman and I was doing a pitch for something. And she said, Cheryl, I don't know if it fits or not. She's like, but what I want to invest in is not the idea. I want to invest in you. And I want to invest in you because I know who you are. I've seen what you've done. And I don't want you to forget who you are and what you've done. And like, I need you to remember that. And that, it just, it warmed my soul and it touched my heart in a way that I needed at that point in time. And so I keep trying to remind myself, like, don't erase what you've done because it's so easy to forget who you are and let other people define you. And that's what I was hiding from, right? Like that fear of people seeing me and defining me by their own terms.
That's good. Fear of being seen causes us to hide. Fear of failing causes us not to move on, as it goes back to your M's
Yeah.
in that process. That's so vital and critical. And thank you so much for sharing that. And I know the investigation continues as we see different things crop up. Were there, do you remember feeling seen and unheard as a young child, or do you think that's something that you took on your own?
I think it's a little bit of a both and I had some things happen and I know that I changed as a result of them and probably hoped in my adult mind, hindsight looks back and is like, I wish somebody would have noticed that I changed, right? And I don't know if my child, like maybe childlike, I was hoping that people would notice that I changed, like the happiness and joy and the frivolity that I moved with was gone. And so I don't know if that was just like how I reacted to what happened or whether I was really hoping that people would notice. But I definitely was like in this mode of like after a while like well now it's too far gone and why bring it up now? And then I remember at one point in time in my teenage years having this battle with family members about like what get over it, like move on, like whatever. And like really realizing at that point in time, especially for the elders who were kind of like, like this is a family matter. Like we don't need to talk, right? And just at that point in time, kind of being like, Tony, it hurts more to like be seen and ignored than it does to just not be seen. And I think that that was, and when you make a mistake, people are quick to jump on that, but not on the good things. And so I've moved through life, like in work, like doing the work, but typically being like the behind the scenes, and people knew I did it, but then I would always be like, don't mention me or don't say anything because when it all goes wrong, I know it's going to be my fault. And
Mm,
I remember my former boss, I remember having a meeting with him and I was talking about the work. And I kept, and at some point he said, who's we? You keep saying we did this and who's we? And it had become like the way that I spoke. And I was like, well, we is me. Like I did this, I did that. But I had always talked in this broader thing because if I didn't, people would say, you didn't do this by yourself and we helped and we did whatever. And then when it all fell apart, though, it was always Cheryl did it. And so I just learned over time to just kind of be like, you know what, when it's good, other people want credit for it. When it's bad, you get the credit for it. So just, just kind of just do the work. It doesn't matter. Try to be invisible. And even with all of that, it's still all like in the end for me went bad, right? Because I thought about when we started and you said when it's time to move on or you need to leave and you get that nudge and you don't, I didn't take the nudge. God had really told me in October of 2023 to leave my job. and I didn't, and I let other people convince me to stay and to tell me that, and it a year later it was so bad. It was just like headlines and devastation and just it was so bad, and I just was so upset because again, this is what my therapist is helping me through is that I put other people, like I knew that it was time for me to go and I didn't go. And God made sure that I will not go that way again, but it was that still living in that childhood of like, well, let me help everybody else, let me protect other folks, and not really living in the childhood, the little girl piece of age of when you're like, no, but I don't want to do it, right? When they're like, eat your vegetables, clean your room, do all, and when you're like, I don't want to do it, I'm not doing it. And in this case, I did the very thing that I knew deep down in my soul was killing me, you know?
That was powerful. And what I keep hearing in all of this, Cheryl, is at the end of the day, the message really was, you don't matter.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about the impact of self-worth, of doing all the work but not taking the credit, holding your breath, waiting for when it goes bad, you get all the credit, you get all the blame,
Yeah.
elevating other people when really you know you did it, and not being able to own that. Little girls say, ah, look what I did. I tied my shoe,
Yes, exactly.
cleaned up my room. I made this, blah, blah, blah. And
Mhm.
so what that slowly, that erosion, we're back to the erosion of Sheryl, you're worth it.
Yeah.
Sheryl, you are lovable. Staci, you are lovable. That was my thing.
Yeah.
So how, and again, this whole thing started with me at 52 noticing there's something in me that dictates how I function today from when I was 7.
Mm.
And I was able to have some clarity around that. But then the continuous layers of just, if you keep hearing that inner voice, so all the methods of meditating and moving and being mindful, still mindfully still, if there's such a thing, or mindful so that your brain can just relax and be in that place where God can speak. And even honoring that you heard from God
Yeah.
and letting other people who didn't hear from God about you wanted you to stay, because guess what, Cheryl? You were doing all the work. They didn't want you to leave because you were covering them and you were protecting them. And I very much resonate with that, knowing when it's time to go and wrestling with that. It's a wrestling, I physically do this. Like this is, there's this tug and pull. So
Hmm.
I commend you for being at this place, for modeling a healing journey, a way of healing your little girl,
Yeah.
to coax her out of hiding, to continue to not only do that for yourself, but you're doing it for others. And what a blessing that is. And I definitely want to participate and continue to share this. So I will be sharing this with my audience.
Thank you.
And even in, I have many prompts in my journal that I'd love to share with you and your audience, of just
Yeah.
things to look at, questions to ask, constantly being curious. And the other thing I'll add is honor that little girl,
Mm.
because she was taking care of you the best way she knew how,
Right.
and being grateful that whatever that situation was, it suddenly says, "Oh, Cheryl, just forget about it. Move on. Nobody want to hear about that. We don't want to talk about that." But meanwhile,
Right.
you're suffering in agony and silence alone. And yes, that little girl's change of demeanor was a cry for help. That's how little kids cry for help,
Right.
because they don't have the vocabulary to say this, whatever, whatever. I have somebody I interviewed, this family member is touching me inappropriately. And
Right.
that's so often the story. And then it's a family secret.
Hmm.
Yikes.
Yeah.
How painful that is. And what does that say about me?
Can I just tell you, I was in a writer's workshop a couple weeks ago now and was, talking about like the how difficult it was. I had written a piece about like leaving my job and starting over and having to like, find yourself again. And just talking about hurt and harm. And most of the people in there were in their late 70s, early 80s. And two of the people said, they wanted to be brave enough to talk about what happened to them as a child and they couldn't do it, right? Like and it just resonated with me that we have really created these spaces where people in their 80s are still not addressing, right? The childhood trauma of being touched inappropriately or being harmed. And they're like, they still don't feel brave enough to tell that story, right?
Mm.
Or to begin that process. And the people who did it and the people who were supposed to protect them aren't even alive anymore. And yet they're still trying to protect the family name so when you said that about family secrets, it just took me back to that, just sitting there with those folks and being like, how much me going through this process of like, let's talk about like how we always have these moments of trauma bonding, but like how do we actually heal? And like we're not bonding through healing. And so it just resonated with me because that came up where I was in this room with these folks who were like, oh, I wish I could have told my story. I wish I would have told my story. And one woman really she started crying and she's just like, I forgot about how much hurt I was carrying as that ch little girl, you know?
It almost brings me to tears because you know how real it is
Yeah,
and how necessary this work is
yeah,
to create pathways for people to come out of that. If those women can come in color with you to
yeah.
find that little girl, to heal that little girl, because God does not want us to carry that.
No, no. And it just manifests in so many different ways because when we internalize that, it affects our health, our movement, like our mental state. It has been, you know, it yeah, it is it is a journey that 9, 10 months ago, if I had not had, and there was one day I was just at my worst, and I was like, I don't know how I'm gonna, and God, just at that very moment, somebody called me and didn't know that I needed it, they said the right things, didn't know, and I just knew it was of God. But I was like, and from there, I was able to take a walk and turn on music and do all these other things. But like, if people do not have and this is why, part of why I've been doing like the online pieces, and then we'll do some of these things in person because we do not have networks of support. And I I maybe didn't talk to somebody every day. I maybe wasn't in a group of folks, but if I did not have a network of support, I don't know if I would even be here right now.
Absolutely. And I can definitely attest to the physical impact. I had high blood pressure at 17,
Mm,
had a kidney transplant at 32, coming up on my 17-year transplant anniversary
wow.
from a living donor who God sent to give me a kidney. I mean, so those divine touches too. God said, baby, here's what you need right now. Let me just touch
Yeah.
you. You just
God
need this
bless.
phone call. And I put those words in that person's mouth. So when we ignore and when we carry this pain,
Yeah.
we can't even imagine the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual ramifications it has on us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So thank you for joining in this work. Thank you for doing it for yourself first and foremost, because you matter,
Yeah.
because your voice matters, your story matters. Whoever you need to tell it to, however you need to tell it, and coaxing that, it's like a kitten, right? Coaxing that little girl out from under the couch. It's
Yeah.
safe to come out
Yeah.
because we're gonna listen. We love you. We got you.
Yeah.
And I know there's so much more that we could tell, but I think this is a good place to just put a pin in this and just share this message. What would you share to our listeners who need encouragement to come out of hiding or whatever, however you want to put it?
Yeah, it is so cliche. I was thinking about this. I actually was writing in my journal about it this morning. It's so cliche to say it gets better. And I think it gets better, but if people like getting better means that there is a process of getting to better.
Mm,
And the message is meant to be don't give up because it will be better. But people need something in the moment of not being better. And so I would just really say to folks, like, find that thing that allows you, right? And some people self-medicate and use drugs or alcohol, like, but you've got to find that thing that doesn't cause your body or your mental state harm, but allows you like respite from the hurt, right? And that's why when I think about little girls going out, like go hopscotch, go jump rope, right? Go draw a picture, go do that thing. When I was a kindergarten teacher, I used to, when kids would come in crying, especially at the beginning of the year when they didn't want to separate from their parents, I would say, write your mom a note. Draw your mom a picture because they couldn't write yet. Draw your mom a picture. And I ran into a woman, that was 30 years ago. I ran into a woman not too long ago whose son was in, I think, my first kindergarten classroom, maybe second. And she said, "Oh my God, Cheryl, I still have all those pictures from when he came home the first 2 weeks of kindergarten, where he had drawn a picture because he cried for the first 2 weeks of kindergarten." She said after a while, she was like, "Please, no more pictures." But by then, he had stopped. But like that coming in, look, he drew for like 2 minutes. And after that, he was on to the next thing. He was able to move on. You have got to find your thing. And I would say start with writing, even if it's all, The Artist Way in that book, The Artist Way. If folks haven't read it, you should read it. He says, journal, write every morning, even if you're just writing blah, 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 blah. Like draw, write, do something that allows you to take it from here, that allows you to take it from here and get it out.
Absolutely.
That's what I would say.
I love that. And as a life coach, I tell people exactly the same thing. Let it unlock your brain, get it out, stream of consciousness, look up at whatever you see in the room, just write it just to let yourself get in that flow.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us. This has been fantastic. I will see you at your event. I know I'm going to come to at least one, probably the one before this releases. So I'm going to make sure we share this, and people who are following the little girl journey that I offer join the little girl revival that you offer. It's
Yeah.
totally in sync. So
Yes.
such a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoy. I was looking around because you were giving so many great gems, and I was like, I want to write it down, but I don't want to be distracted. So I definitely want to know when this drops because I want to go back and get all the nuggets you left.
Well, thank you so much. All right. Well, to our audience, thank you for joining us. This has been a wonderful another episode of Staci Speaks Hope for you to gather some gems, some healing tips for your little girl. Stay tuned and be blessed. Thank you for watching Staci Speaks Hope. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. To schedule a free coaching call, the link is in the description.
Grown woman holding in story she needs to tell what God really wants you to do in this world. In his name, hope to break free from the shackles and the lies that have become your truth and put blinders on your eyes. You built walls around your heart. You have plugged up your ears. Get freedom to hope's what you need. It's in reach. Wipe your tears.